Welcome to our college admissions webinar. So my name is Michelle He. I am the co-founder and chief academic officer of To the Top Education Group. And here with me are two wonderful speakers, and I want to introduce them. Max Manasevit. He is a senior international admission counselor at Tulane University in the beautiful city of New Orleans. And thank you for spending your evening with us, Max. My other speaker on my left is my coworker, Dr. Kieran Lyons. He's the director of education programs of my company. Actually, Dr. Lyons just successfully defended his dissertation last week. So he's going to receive his PhD in English from LSU very soon. Congratulations.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. I will start with Max. First of all, how is it going on here there in New Orleans? Is it still under lockdown?
Yeah, so our statewide stay-at-home order here in Louisiana was extended till May 15th, but we have had very strong local and state leadership, so we've seen a continuous sort of downturn in cases, so things are hopefully looking up.
Our governor of Texas reopened the state last Friday, but it's still only partial open, like restaurants can only operate at 25% capacity. Which pretty much brings us to our webinar theme tonight. So really, Max, I just want to ask you, so what is your sense of the impact of COVID-19 on the admissions process in general? And we want to start with the current senior class, right? They've already finished their application, and for Tulane, are you guys extending the May 1st commit deadline?
Yeah, so obviously there are a few national trends. Many universities have extended their deposit deadline to June 1. Tulane has not extended. We work in consortium with a group of schools. They decided sort of collectively not to extend the deadline. But yeah, that's definitely a trend that's been seen. There's just a lot more uncertainty, more students applying for gap years. Most likely we'll see more universities going to their wait lists. But those are sort of the national trends at Tulane. This senior class, it was faced with a lot of uncertainty. Tulane, like most universities, has canceled almost all summer programming. Like most universities as well, we're planning on having students in fall of 2020, but we just a few days ago started to see other universities cancel those plans. Our plan, once again, as I said, is to host students fall of 2020, but also not to sort of endanger any students, faculty, or staff. So unfortunately, I know it's not what seniors want to hear, but we're asking them to sort of be patient and trust us that we're going to make the best decision that we can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So okay, that's interesting. So basically, you've got your accepted students already committing, right? Because today's already May 4th. So you've got that already. I was going to share something, but it didn't work out very well. So, okay, so then let's go back to the senior class. What we've discovered this so far from our students, it seems to me that more students have been accepted after being put on the waiting list. Is that what you've observed at Tulane and you've heard from your peers at other universities?
Yeah, so we took some students off the wait list. It wasn't a ton, but it's more than we have in years past. And I think some other universities have done the same. They're sort of in line with the public health pandemic that COVID-19's caused. It also caused sort of an economic depression, recession. So we've seen a lot more students be a lot more fiscally cautious, potentially take gap years, have decisions that now for new financial realities have been reassessed. And I think all of that sort of leads to the uncertainty on this side of the desk, which is usually when universities will go to the wait list.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, by the way, so Kieran, feel free to chime in if you have something to add. And also, like in terms of gap year, I want to just follow up on that. Like, are you offering the gap year option to the incoming freshmen, or asking them if they want to start in spring? I mean, is there more flexibility there?
So we don't have an option for that gap semester, but we always have the opportunity for students to take a gap year. We haven't pushed it more so than we have in years prior, but we have seen an increase in people who are interested in that option. Once again, I think the financial realities are important, but also our average student comes from a little more than 700 miles away. I think there are a lot of parents right now that are a little more hesitant without sort of a clear way out of the pandemic to send their kids to a school that's a little farther away.
And a little more expensive too. So, and also speaking of which, I know this really hard to make a decision. Normally, the students will tour campuses, right? Like given the pandemic, they cannot do that right now. So is your school offering more virtual tours for them, and is that as effective?
Yeah, so we have lots of virtual programming. A lot of it's pre-recorded through our website, so you can go on a campus tour. We also do multiple virtual events. We started really in March. I've led sessions, anything from sort of more general focus to juniors about essay writing. And then I did an admitted student event that really focused on the city of New Orleans and different neighborhoods. We know that for students looking to move farther away from home for college, the city and environment they're going to be in is really important. We don't think anything really lives up to being in New Orleans, but we've been doing our best to really build out those digital offerings, both sort of webinar sessions like this and also recorded YouTube videos. I think we got really far out ahead pretty early, but I'll say I think a lot of our peer schools are doing a very admirable job as well to sort of understand the bind that families looking at college right now are in and building out their virtual offerings as well.
Yeah. Even if you had some sort of virtual presence, now you are forced to buff that up, right? Because this is like a really unusual time. Of course, as you know, our audience, we have a large international student population in the audience today with us. Obviously, we want to know more about the impact on the international student body, right? Because the U.S. consulates have been closed. They have challenges getting a visa. There's travel restrictions. So how is your school dealing with that, especially since you are in the international student admissions?
Yeah, so luckily, this is something, I don't want to say luckily, I do think working with international students, however, I've had the opportunity to sort of understand that this was something that was happening for a little longer than maybe some domestic counselors have. We knew sort of pretty early on that there was going to be an issue with visas as soon as the U.S. embassies and consulates started closing internationally. We don't have a perfect solution to the issue. We don't control the consulates. We are working on a plan to ensure that if campuses open in the fall, international students will have the ability to start fall 2020, whether that's completely online, whether that's online sort of hybrid. So as visas come in, they have the option to come to campus. And we're still exploring all of those options, but we intend to honor our commitment to bring international students either to campus or at least allow them to be part of the fall class, class of 2024 in terms of graduation year. We're doing everything we can to, once again, honor that sort of commitment. I wish I had stronger and better answers, but I can't control, unfortunately, the consulates or the embassies.
Yeah, there has been a lot of concern from students in China, right? Because they cannot get their visa yet, and also the flights are not available. So, like for the international students, what you are saying that they say if they cannot get their visa, if they cannot come here this fall, in theory, they can take classes online from their country.
Exactly. And taking into account the time difference. I actually teach a bridge program at Tulane that's mostly for Chinese students. We will do it from 7 to 10 p.m. New Orleans time, so it's morning in China. We can't force the consulates to sort of overstaff and process faster, but we can sort of use digital technology to ensure that they can still matriculate in the fall and stay on a 4-year plan.
Oh, and speaking of which, right, so what is your school's plan for fall semester? Are you going to open as normal, or will there be any delay?
Yeah, so our plan currently is to be open fall 2020 and to host students. At the same time, we're not going to do anything that jeopardizes the safety of students or staff, or that is in contradiction of the sort of public health experts. So we're working on all sorts of contingency plans based on what the situation looks like in the fall, but our current plan is to be open in fall 2020.
So are you going to still offer some online classes as a hybrid?
I mean, once again, if for what somehow this all goes away and we don't have to do that, then we won't. But I think in all probability, we'll need to be offering some sort of online and hybrid options, especially for international students. I just talked to an admitted student who said her interview at the consulate was in mid-November, right? There's no way she could matriculate without some sort of hybrid program. And once again, we plan on honoring sort of those acceptance letters in the time frame that they were written. So we will make sure to have a solution for students like that.
Wow, yeah. And also for domestic students, like financial aid, so that will be renegotiated, I mean, given their financial situation.
Yeah, so for domestic students, we just announced a few days ago that if you've had an income reduction of 15%, 1.5 or more, we would sort of repackage your financial aid.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so really those are the ones I can think of as far as the current seniors. So now let's move on to the juniors. If you think it's bad enough for the seniors, I feel like it's even worse for the juniors, right? Their classes have been canceled, they've been like learning online, and the tests have been canceled. So do you think the juniors are at a disadvantage? Why or why not? And I mean, how do you feel?
It's sort of an interesting way to put it, if they're an advantage or disadvantage. To be honest, it's hard for me to say. I think maybe after they apply, it'll be easier to know. But Tulane, for example, is going test optional for the incoming juniors. We've seen a lot of schools go test optional for this junior class. Usually when a school goes test optional, they do anywhere between 3 to 5 years of sort of trial runs and pilot programs. And now we have all of these sort of national universities going test optional within a time frame of anywhere from six weeks to 12 weeks. So I think it'll be really interesting to see how different universities go about doing that. I think it's going to be an admission cycle that's very different because of this sort of not only the number of universities going test optional, but the time frame in which they did that. I think these juniors, it sort of depends, right? There are some students who do very well and struggle on other parts of the application. I think this might be a very tough year for students like that. Students, which I feel like I meet more of, really detest those standardized tests and think their GPA or other parts of their application are truer to who they are, will probably have an advantage in this admission cycle that they might not have had during others, due once again to those tests not being mandatory or potentially even offered.
Right, and the other aspect of that is obviously they've been taking classes online, right? This distance learning. So some schools are doing this pass-fail. So when you evaluate their transcript, are you going to penalize them for it, or is this the same as the other transcript?
Yeah, I mean, our philosophy, and I think it's fair to say this is true of most selective universities, is we pride ourselves on counselors of knowing the high school. And if a high school is offering pass-fail grades, we're not going to penalize someone for doing something that was acceptable within the context of their high school.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, it's kind of beyond their control, right? It's
Yeah.
not like they're taking the easy way out. So then what is your advice for our juniors right now? So what would you like to see them doing right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I would say the first thing I want to make sure everyone's doing, this is a time of great sort of psychological stress for everyone. I want to make sure that they're making sure they're happy and healthy. There's not a lot of things to do besides stare at a screen. So I think now more so than ever, if you need a break, you just need to recharge. I think that's really appropriate. I think sometimes this process gets so stressful that gets forgotten. I think now that's more important than ever. But as I said before, that the academic part of the application is going to be very different for a lot of schools. So if there's a lot of nervous energy and students want to put it somewhere towards improving an application, working on essays, finding ways to get involved. I know involvement's probably going to look different for their second semester junior year and potentially even their senior year. So I would advise them to remember that universities don't really care how you spend your time. What you do to how you spend your time during your extracurricular activities. We just like to see that you're spending it constructively in some way. I think sometimes there's this huge pressure on students to get super involved because they think university reps like myself like to see it when we read applications. But we only care that students are involved because we want them to be involved when they come to campus. So using that time to really create something, either take a leadership role, finish a project, looks a lot better on a college admission application than just a smattering of 12 activities each done for 90 minutes a week.
Yeah, in fact, especially this summer, right? Like summer schools have been canceled. Some of those internship has been canceled. They feel like, okay, what should I do this summer, right? It's a challenge for them.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think I would encourage students who are really in a bind like that to remember they're not in this alone. It's not like their internship got canceled while kids all across America were going to those same internships. And to remember, I always like to say, right, when we're reading applications, we're not monsters, but we're also not mind readers, right? If you had an internship that you thought was going to be sort of the pinnacle of your high school curriculum, but the pinnacle of your high school career, but you can't do it for whatever reason, and you end up reading 12 books you've always wanted to read instead, just let us know that you had this internship lined up and instead you decided to go on this great sort of literary journey. We understand that wasn't your choice, but as opposed to just eating bonbons, once again, you immerse yourself in literature or you picked up an instrument or something like that.
That is good advice. Good advice. Yeah. So then let's look even beyond the juniors, right? So do you see any impact on the class of 2022 and also what about the employment front, right? Students not able to find jobs after they graduate from college. Do you see any impact for those students?
So sorry, we're talking about high school students or current college students? So
I guess 2022, that's high school graduates. Okay. But the employment, that's actually a question pre-submitted. I think they were talking about the college graduates finding jobs.
Yeah. I think Tulane has great career services, but for an employment question like that, I don't think I'm qualified to answer that. I read the news. It seems like there's going to be an economic downturn that will affect employment, but I couldn't really get more specific than that on the sort of details. For students who are still in 10th grade, I think it's too soon to sort of know how this will affect them. Once again, that's a time frame where there could be a vaccine and this goes away, and universities go back to reverse their sort of 1-year test optional trial, and then this won't really look that different to them. It's super possible we're also still sort of in this on and off social distancing phase, and universities are still test optional. I think just about any possibility in between is still on the table. So I think it might be a little too soon to sort of answer those questions.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I was going to add, definitely right now is the worst time to look for a job, and given all the layoffs, I think 30 million of Americans have filed for unemployment. But you can certainly prepare, right, to make yourself more marketable, maybe after the pandemic is over. Thank you, Max. So please stay on. I will ask some questions to Kieran, but you can feel free to jump in if you have anything to add. So Kieran, first of all, how is it going on now in Mississippi? I actually watched the interview of your governor the other day. He wants to reopen as well.
Yeah, it's a lot like Texas. The state itself is pretty much reopening. My town, I'm in Oxford, Mississippi, is opening more slowly. There's still a lot of rules, but the University of Mississippi, which is about a mile or two from where I am right now, it's a big SEC school, and they're still doing online classes only, and graduation has been canceled. So it's still affecting this college town a lot.
To ask you about the COVID-19's impact on standardized tests, more specifically. I know you've talked about this before.
Yeah, so it changes, every week or so, but in general, there's a mix of cancellations, postponements, and format changes. Most of the tests that people would be taking to prepare for college are allowing at least greater flexibility. So if you're a sophomore taking the SAT early, or you're taking an AP class and you're not a junior, you can often choose to wait and take it when things have sort of settled down in a more regular format for you. So before I talk about the specific exams, things can vary outside of the US, and I'm mostly speaking about the changes that have made for the domestic tests, which sometimes affect international testing differently. The US Department of Education has waived all state level standardized tests, so you don't have to worry about those at all. Like the Texas has the STAR tests, they're just not happening. One of the biggest changes, the AP exams are now all online, and they're much shorter. They're only 45 minutes, and they're just 1 or 2 free response questions, which can be an essay question or like an extended problem, depending on what kind of test it is. And they only cover course content up to when school started closing. I think early March is when they did draw the line. And they're offering free classes as usual, but they're a little bit more intense now with celebrity guests even on the YouTube page for College Board. They had Lin-Manuel Miranda guest in the US History AP class the other day. IB exams, International Baccalaureate, canceled. So credit is essentially going to be calculated based on coursework that was completed before school started shutting down. And that's pretty stressful, I think, but they seem very confident that they can predict the score you probably would have gotten on the exams, so that's where they're going. SAT and ACT are going forward as normal, but they've been canceling a lot of dates, but also adding new ones later in the year and early next year. So SATs will be offered every month in 2020, starting in August, and the next ACT test is June 13th. The 2 ETS tests that might be relevant are TOEFL and the GRE. They will be moving online, but if you're in mainland China, they're still negotiating with the Chinese government about how that will look. That's one of the exceptions where they don't already have the test set up, but they will. And my advice in general with these things is to proceed as close to your original plan as possible if you're a junior. You might want to consider skipping the June ACT, especially if you're in the US or someplace that's still kind of affected, because you don't want to be preparing for a date that ends up getting canceled or where because of your local regulations you can't go. So I would recommend, if you can, pushing back the ACT. The SAT's next exam in August is probably fine. And you should use the extra time to study, or if you or your student are pretty much already at your goal score, you can focus more on coursework, take a break, just maintain a little bit of practice, but you can actually just take the time to either relax or make sure that you finish out the year with a good GPA.
That actually reminded me, I have a question for Max regarding AP test. So will colleges still give these students AP credits if it's like a 45-minute online test?
Yeah, so Tulane has decided that it will give general credit. We do need every test that we give specific departmental credit for to be approved by the department. I think there are a lot of universities that are sort of going that route. If you already have your college list, I would sort of go on their website. There isn't sort of any large consensus. Besides, generally, universities are trying to be accommodating and at least accept some credit. There are exceptions, but that does seem to be sort of more generally widespread acceptance. I also said Tulane was going test optional, only because you mentioned the TOEFL. Tulane has decided to be more flexible in accepting English proficiency. We will conduct interviews for students who appeal them. We'll also take the online Duolingo test in lieu of an official TOEFL or IELTS due to the sort of testing issue that we're seeing.
That's good to know. I know that more universities are accepting Duolingo now, which they can take at home on their computer. So that is definitely another option for international students. Good. Now talk about this test optional. Actually, I would like the opinion from both of you. So if colleges are going test optional, should the juniors still take their ACT or ACT and submit their test score?
I would say you should absolutely still take them as long as it is possible for you to do so. As long as there is a date where you can safely leave your house and take the tests, I don't think you should use it as an excuse not to. But if after taking it and retaking it, ideally with some sort of tutoring support or something like that, you really can't get it up to where it matches the rest of your application, then just don't report it. And also I would say probably don't do the automatic free reporting that you're able to do with some standardized tests when you take them until you know what score you got.
Max, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, there's generally no harm in taking the test. I think the only caveat is, good tutoring can go a long way, but if you take that test and you take a few practice tests and they're all really completely out of line, you're really hopelessly even out of range, then yeah, maybe use that time to strengthen the rest of your application. But otherwise, there really is nothing but time right now. There's no harm, especially, as you said, if you don't have free reporting, why not? You can always surprise yourself.
Yeah, and we see a lot of these really prestigious schools at least temporarily suspending some of their testing requirements. Harvard and Cornell adjusted theirs, I think at least not requiring subject tests. The University of California system, and of course Tulane.
Yeah, more and more universities are joining that list. But let's talk about the AP test. I know, Kieran, you've been tutoring some students on the AP English test. So how do you feel about this new format? The 45 minutes, is it easier or harder than before?
Well, it's easier to teach because it's only one thing. It depends on the students, because I'm tutoring students whose second language is English, and the AP English language AP exam is you very quickly read a long passage and try to deeply understand it and then write an essay. And if those aren't your strongest points on practice tests or just in general what you're good at, you'd be at a huge disadvantage, I think. For some people, it'll be a lot better. The benefit is you only have to plan for that one thing. You don't have to quiz yourself on, like knowing about how to about grammar beyond how to write effectively. You can solely focus on what you know it's going to be based on. For some of the topics, however, so for some of the classes, however, it's going to look a little bit more surprising because it won't be exactly the same as a question that was going to be on the test. AP English, it's pretty much exactly the same with extra 5 minutes to finish it. But some of the other ones, like history, is actually changing like the number of sources you get. So some of those will be more challenging and a little bit more of I think a wild card. But the AP, I do want to say again, the YouTube videos that the College Board puts out are pretty effective, pretty useful, because they switch them to be totally only focusing on what's going to be on the exam. So it's just the one question or two questions that are on the exam for each of the courses.
Oh, okay.
I will say, at least as an admission counselor that works with students who are not often native English speakers, these exams generally serve two purposes. One, credit in college, but also potentially to gain admittance. I think, and most people in my office agree, that these new tests give us more information. I think the vast majority of international admission counselors working with non-native English speaking populations, writing and comprehension in English is the thing that we're most concerned about. And that's sort of what the new AP format is testing. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but that seems like all these tests are sort of going to that format, aren't they?
That sounds right. And that sounds right, especially for the subjects where it is an essay or several essays. Computer science is still not going to be an essay. And it may not reveal quite as much, but yeah, and it will help. Well, it could be good or bad, right? Because if you're an excellent test taker and you're really good at multiple choice, this is going to be harder for you. But I do think it is, for better or worse, more revealing. Yeah.
That's actually good to know. In 45 minutes, right, you can actually get more out of the student. I always feel like multiple choice is more limiting. You can game it easier.
Exactly.
So, okay, and I know that Matt mentioned this earlier. I want to ask both of your opinions on this. So, like interview, actually, this one came from one of the questions pre-submitted. So, for current high school juniors, in case all interviews are to move to online, what are your recommendations for successful virtual interview compared to a face-to-face one? In terms of making good impressions, good body language, what is your advice?
I actually have an extremely comprehensive response to this, and so I'm not going to go into detail about everything, but I will mention some of the things that need to be considered. And one big thing is, I think a lot of people have noticed by possibly working online, taking classes online, is that technology can really get in the way. When you go and meet someone at a coffee shop to do your college interview, or you go to the campus, you might have trouble finding parking, but probably you're going to eventually be face-to-face and there's not going to be any glitches. But with technology, there's a lot of issues. You need to make sure you have fast enough internet for a video call at the time of day or night when you're going to be doing your interview, because it can change. Make sure that other people aren't using up the Wi-Fi. Make sure no one is watching high-definition movies at the time. Maybe the biggest thing is to test the software in advance, whether it's Zoom or something they use, if you can. And I would even say, I don't love telling people that they ought to spend money, but if you have a lot of interviews that are going to make a big difference, you might want to try to get a webcam, even if it's a cheap one, because it'll probably be better than whatever is in your computer. Especially in my case, my webcam is actually weirdly by my keyboard and it looks horrible. My built-in webcam, and I use this other one that's higher up. The next challenge beyond technology is the fact that you have to invite someone into a room of your house where probably your entire family is going to be. Make sure that your background is tidy and blank, especially if it's your bedroom or something personal, because they'll probably be looking at it. And also just think of yourself as like you're setting up a shot for a movie. You should pay attention to lighting, and my lighting's not great right now, but most of it should be coming from sort of in front of your ears, not behind you. You want light on your face and probably on the sides of your face. Your camera should be eye level or higher, and you shouldn't be too close or too far. But it's really weird when someone's like way too close and their head's really big. You want to be about where all three of us are sitting. Our shoulders are visible and there's space above our heads. And dress like you would, except you don't need to wear a jacket or anything because it would be awkward to have to sit down with that. And the specific elements of body language and speech that relate to doing these online interviews are, you should try to look in the webcam as much as possible. It's especially easier if you put it up by your eye level, especially when you are speaking, because otherwise it'll look like you are looking away. And also try really hard not to look at yourself, your little image. There's a lot of things you can do. You can like make the image small and move it up of the other person, move it up under the webcam. Whatever you can do to make it seem like you are looking at them and talking to them. And I think you should be especially friendly, obviously engaged, smile more, make sure you're so clearly paying attention, because we know that people can be distracted by things on the screen, things we can't see. So it's even more important to have that human touch and that friendliness and politeness when you're doing an interview online. And maybe the last thing, if there are technical problems, if you do have trouble, if people's internet gets bad, or if stuff gets cut out, just stay calm. Don't apologize more than you need to. Move from apologizing to trying to figure it out, and as quickly as you can, and just try to. Everyone's gone through technical troubles. It's not the end of the world, and to try to maintain your composure if it happens, and it probably eventually will happen.
Wow, that is really good advice, really helpful and useful. Max, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, not a ton. That was so thorough. I think a few things to keep in mind is universities offer interviews, but they also offer a lot of different types of interviews, and they're pretty clear what type of interview they're going to be. For example, right now I'm doing coffee chats with juniors. In the email that goes out when students sign up, it basically says, please come prepared with questions. This is your time to find out more about the university. I sort of expect students to be on there with questions and sort of not just regurgitating their resume. Sometimes in the admission cycle, we'll send out interview requests for very prestigious scholarships, where it's sort of very clear that they're being evaluated for a scholarship, right? I'm the one generally going to be asking questions. They may be a little more probing. I want to know more about them. But it's never really a secret, right? Whenever you sign up for an interview, really read pretty clearly what it is to get a better sense of the expectation of what we're trying to get at. Is this sort of an easy conversation early on in the process, or is this really sort of a final round interview where the person you're talking to is going to go sort of defend you before? I know that sounds intimidating, but it's all there. It's in the email correspondences. It's on the websites. And then only because this happens to me so much, it's a huge pet peeve of mine. Everyone in your family's online. Of course, internet goes out or your video chat doesn't work. Send me an email as soon as you can. I've had students not be able to meet me for a virtual session, email me a few minutes later, say they're doing it from their phone because the power's out at the house and they can't get it to work. Totally understand. As I said, I'm not a monster, but I'm also not a mind reader. When I have a student circle back to me 8 days later to explain that their Wi-Fi went out and that's why they weren't there, that leaves a very different sort of taste in your mouth.
Wow, that was really good to know. Yeah, I feel like sometimes they need to pay attention to the instructions, right? Read the email, so follow it, and that's important. It might seem minor, but sometimes the devil is in the detail. Really good advice. And then I think either Max or Kieran mentioned the essay earlier. So should students write about COVID-19 in their essay?
Yeah, so you're asking about for their college, the personal.
College admission, yeah, the main essay, the personal statement.
Well, first of all, I am interested in what Max has to say about this because there's going to be a huge wave of essays about COVID. I mean, I even remember when I was in college, I was partly responsible for reading through people's forums when they were trying to get matched with roommates, and everyone wrote about how Avatar was their favorite movie because it came out the year before, and then the next year no one wrote about it. It was all like you couldn't match people based on Avatar because every single person liked Avatar. You can write about it. It's definitely not off limits, but you shouldn't write about it just because it happened to you, because it did happen to everyone else. And, you know, it affects everyone in different ways. It's a really rare disaster where it really does affect every single person almost in the world. But if there is a personal connection or perspective that that you have with it, or something about you that your experience with COVID allows you to connect to or share or elaborate, then sure. But it's still an essay about you and not an essay about COVID. And your admissions officers will be reading so many COVID essays. Yours needs to stand out, but that it doesn't mean you have to have had a really extreme experience with COVID. I think if you think about it as deciding to write about a common experience that many people write about, like parents' divorce, extracurricular activities like band, moving, like as a family or immigrating. These are topics that a lot of people write about, and the trick is always, how do you write about you through them rather than just writing about COVID. You shouldn't write a COVID essay. You should write an essay about you, regardless of whether it mentions the virus or not.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect answer. I'll honestly be even a little more blunt. I'm dreading reading the COVID essays because, well, there are two things that I think sink otherwise very strong writers. First is the inability to realize that something that's important to them isn't necessarily unique to them. And if I'm reading thousands of essays, you know, I played basketball in high school. Everyone I knew played basketball in high school. Think about all the other high schools, right? But then people go to that next level. It's like, well, what's my connection to basketball? Oh, I missed the game-winning shot, or I made the game-winning shot. There's going to be a lot of stories like that about COVID. So it'll be very hard to stand out, right? If you write an essay that 20,000 people write on the same topic, or you write an essay that about a topic no one else has written about, that latter essay has a better chance of standing out. Mm-hmm. But the bigger issue that I see with essays, I don't know where this came from. I want to yell at the person who started giving this advice, is that like your essay needs to be about a struggle. Mm-hmm. And I often see these essays that take what are no doubt difficult experiences, but sort of elevating them to these sort of tragic, almost like mythologies. Mm-hmm. And it's okay to be 17 and have had negative experiences. But if you fail to realize the fact that like you've actually had a fairly safe and secure childhood and how great that is, your essay is going to come off wrong, especially because schools that receive a lot of applications will legitimately get essays from students who have had very tragic upbringings or something that you know, really sort of is more of a tearjerker, and saying like, oh, I got sick and then I got better, when you could be reading the next essay from someone, you know, was homeless for 12 years of their life, will sort of make you sound out of touch. And I'm afraid that COVID's going to turn into the sort of next great struggle essay.
Yeah, I can see that happening.
Yeah, that is a really good point. Very good point. And let's take some questions from the chat, and I know you can both see that as well. Here's one. Any financial aid to students whose families have difficulties due to the pandemic? I think that Max already addressed that. Is it possible Texas will also not need a city school? I thought we were waiting for UT Austin and Texas A&M to make a decision on that. Yeah, have you guys heard anything about the UT and Texas A&M on that?
This is specifically on them being test optional?
Yeah. So Max, you have any parting comments for the audience here, or if you want to show us something virtual on your computer to advertise Tulane, please go ahead.
Putting me on the spot. I feel like we're better off getting more interview tips. That's what I want, because I feel like the interviews are always so off. No, I'm more than happy to direct people to our website. I'll put my email here in the chat.
Yes, please. Yeah, please put your email and your university website. So I guess maybe give us a quick recap of the results from this year you just concluded. Is this like a record high in terms of the applicants and record low in terms of acceptance rate?
Yeah, so we just finished up. May 1st was our deposit deadline. Our admission rate went down a little bit. We had about a 13% acceptance rate last year. It looks like we're looking at close to an 11% acceptance rate this upcoming year.
Wow.
Our classes do get get stronger academically pretty consistently year over year. We're also really proud that our classes are getting increasingly diverse. About a third of our students, our incoming freshmen this year, will either be students of color or international students.
Wow. Are you getting more Chinese students?
Yeah, I have a lot of Chinese students coming, both Chinese citizens living in the U.S. and Chinese citizens coming from really all over China. I'm very sad. I usually go to China right about now, but obviously university travel's been canceled. But
right. Actually, I do have one more question for you in terms of deadlines. Like I know you are planning to open up for the next season. So do you foresee extending the deadlines, pushing it out, given the test situation?
For deadlines?
Yeah, like an early action, early decision or regular decision for next fall of 2021.
I don't think so. Just because it does take a while for us to read all the applications and then make decisions. However, I'm not going to pretend I have answers or that anything's written in stone when it's not. I think so much really will depend how COVID-19 sort of plays out over the next 6 to 12 months.
Okay, I see. Yeah. And Kieran, anything you want to add, especially for our juniors, how they can prepare, for college application?
Yeah, well, I did want to say, first of all, Michelle, you know this, I always recommend people apply to Tulane if they're at all within if it's at all possible for them to get in. New Orleans is great. Tulane's a wonderful school. So I'm really happy to have someone from Tulane on this call. To sum it up, if you or your student or your child are the type of person who doesn't reach out and ask for help, this is a reasonable time to do it. Recognizing that a lot of people are really busy, but that people out there like Max really want to help you out, understand that everyone is going through something, and that things will look different. So people are having to put a lot of trust in each other regarding, the test optional is putting some trust in the students, but also in the schools to actually treat them the same way. These changes to all these exams are putting a lot of trust in the actual people who make the exams, and that they are going to evaluate them fairly and they're going to figure it out. From what I've seen, most of the responses are reasonable, and I do think that if you start worrying about everything, you will never run out of things to worry about. We are in it all together in some ways, but that you should reach out to people who can help plan for the future, but also recognize that it is necessarily going to be really frightening for pretty much everyone on every side of admissions, from counseling third-party counselors like us to the actual people representing the schools to the people applying and their parents. And I don't know what the message for that is, but to just do what you can to come up with a plan that is flexible enough that it won't get shattered by the next piece of news, but also firm enough that you don't feel like you have absolutely no idea what's going on. And of course, to the top, we offer a wide range of services to help you with that, but wherever you turn, just to kind of take care of yourself and take it one step at a time.
Yeah, I want to echo both of your comments there. And I also want to let everybody know here, To the Top Education is here to help you. We've been gathering all the latest developments, right? Starting with the test cancellation, the new AP test format, and then now AC. I want to let everybody know that Kieran has been managing our AC process for like 5 years now, and he actually has developed a really powerful curriculum so we can share with you and help you, guide you with your college AC. And we host these kind of meetings to share the information with everybody. And we're in this together. Yeah, don't feel alone. It's oh, I feel so stressed out. I'm a junior. How am I going to apply for college? I haven't taken any ACT test yet. And colleges understand that, right? So we try to. I think if anything, Max, isn't this more challenging for the colleges, right? Because you have to figure out, right? It's on you to gather like how can you still get the information out of the students, right, without all the normal data points.
Yeah, and so it will be challenging. I think it might be exciting as well. As Kieran said, please reach out to us. One, because I think with a lot of schools going test optional, whether you think tests are great or you think they're terrible, they did sort of create these boxes that students would often apply to schools that were within their test range. Without testing, that's going to look a lot different. It's possible we see record numbers of record number of applications, students applying to record number of schools. So please reach out to me or any university you're interested. Once again, because we're bored. You usually get into this field because you're a person and all of a sudden you can't interact with students. Tulane has always tracked interest. We've always been very open about wanting to see demonstrated interest. I think with an increase in going test optional, there might be an even added emphasis. And I know for a fact a lot of our peer schools, a lot of the groups we're in consortium with or that I travel with feel exactly the same way. Holistic review really means we're reviewing everything. So if you take one piece out of that sort of holistic review pie, it means every other slice is more important. So reach out to schools you're interested in, see if they're offering interviews, see if they're hosting virtual sessions. They'll really want to see that.
Okay, so I'm just going to wrap it up and thank you again, Max, for spending your evening with us. Really informative, and thank you, Kieran. And we hope to talk to you guys again next Monday.